Well, joining me now is great friend of the program, New York Post editor-at-large, Kelly Jane Torrance. Kelly, thanks so much for coming on the U.S. Report. I want to start with all of this news about EPA boss, the new EPA boss, Lee Zeldin, who has made a miraculous discovery that the Biden administration awarded $2 billion to a climate group with ties to Stacey Abrams. Now, apparently this money was earmarked for something called Power Forward Communities, a left-wing nonprofit. Tell me about this, and I believe you interviewed Lee Zeldin. Is there going to be more on this to come?
You know, Lee Zeldin told me this is just the tip of the iceberg, James. Always glad to be here and glad to tell you about my interview with Lee Zeldin. He exclusively told me in the New York Post about actually $20 billion that the EPA right before the election, once it was clear that Joe Biden was out and Kamala Harris was in as the nominee, they parked $20 billion at Citibank, which was collecting interest on that money, by the way, and it was going to be awarded to just 8 entities, and they were all groups like the one you mentioned. Pretty much every group has the word environmental justice on their website, and $2 billion of that $20 billion went to that group that is linked to Stacey Abrams, who I like to call the most famous election denier you don't know about.
That's right. It's so what you're saying here, Lee Zeldin, the charge seems to be that basically when they realized they were going to lose power, they parked a bunch of money so that it could keep up the fight essentially against Donald Trump and the Republicans and keep, presumably an awful lot of pockets lined.
Exactly, James. And, Lee Zeldin and his team noticed this during the transition. After the election, there was a Project Veritas video, and they went undercover and interviewed an EPA employee, hopefully not an EPA employee anymore, who said, "We are throwing gold bars off the Titanic." And Lee told me that gold bars meant taxpayer money, and throwing it off the Titanic meant they knew they were wasting this money. And the guy even says in the video, they're hoping to set themselves up for jobs afterwards. Now, this money was from the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a 2022 law. It wasn't awarded until August and September of 2024. Conveniently, just after Joe Biden withdrew in July after that disastrous debate performance. Clearly, they thought, wow, Donald Trump actually could win this thing. And they put $20 billion away. Now, as Lee told me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And that video is what tipped him and his team off. And so even without DOGE, who's, that group's also doing a great job at looking at fraud and waste, Lee Zeldin and his team found this himself, and they're continuing to look. And he's confident they're going to find more billions that have been completely wasted. This is money that's going, again, environmental justice. These are left-wing groups that are doing nothing to save the planet. They're doing to save their own jobs.
Well, I mean, this is just an amazing and fascinating insight into the way Washington really works and the way these groups carve out taxpayer money to basically feather their own nests and do nothing. It's just shocking. And I think, now we know why Elon Musk is so confident about the money that they're going to wind up saving off of this. And which brings me to another thing I want to ask you about here. Not only have we also seen the new Commerce Secretary, proposing abolishing the IRS, which I think a lot of people would say hallelujah to, but there's also been the possibility floated of a DOGE dividend, possibly $5,000 US, given back to people, given back to taxpayers in savings. What do you make of this? Is this a political stunt, or is there a potential that people could start to really get some money back that's been wasted?
Well, as a U.S. taxpayer, I'm all for this, James. Yeah. $5,000. Wow, I'm a journalist. That could really help me out. But no, I think is it a political stunt? I don't know. But what I do know is that this money, billions of dollars are wasted by Washington every year. And, we've seen some of the evidence of that with the EPA that we just talked about and with all these other agencies. What a tangible measurement of that would be giving taxpayers some money back to show them, hey, we actually care about what we're doing with your money, and we're going to find this waste, and we're going to give some of it back to you. I think it's an excellent idea. I think it's a genius idea, really. Of course, liberals are freaking out because there's no money that they know about that they don't want to spend. imagine, 5,000 per taxpayer. They've got lots of, ideas for that. But I think
Yeah.
it's a great idea. It would really show that this government, this administration is all about giving you your money back that's been wasted by Washington for years. And of course, 5,000, I mean, more than that is wasted every year, but it would certainly go a long way towards helping. And it would certainly juice the economy as well.
And it would send a great message, that the gravy train is over for all of these non-productive outfits out there, the NGOs and all of that stuff doing all the nonsense I spoke about earlier. But I also have to ask you about this, too. This story fascinates me. You're joining us from New York City, of course, where President Trump has now axed the city's congestion tax. Now, the idea here was that they were going to charge people $9 to enter Manhattan in an attempt to reduce traffic. Now, I have always thought congestion taxes were an evil idea, a regressive move against the poor to keep the traffic down so the people who could afford them could drive on them and force everybody else into the filth of the New York City subway system. But don't take it from me. As a person who actually lives in New York City, Kelly, what do you reckon, and what has been the reaction of Democrats, and particularly, I think, the state governor, Kathy Hochul, to this idea that Trump is going to swoop in and, God forbid, take a tax off of New York's working class?
You've got it exactly right, James. And I have to tell you, I actually don't take the subway alone anymore. I haven't taken the subway in months because of the crime. I can't see out of one eye right now. I had a retinal detachment and I feel very vulnerable as a woman, especially on the subways. There's crime every day. I can tell you, violent crime, people getting pushed in front of trains. Subway crime has really gone up. And, every now and then Kathy Hochul will send in a few more cops to the subway for a couple weeks to make a point, and then they're gone. So it's kind of incredible that they are, this congestion tax, and it's actually hurting people like me who there's a fee every time I take a cab or an Uber. And I can tell you, all of the cabbies and Uber drivers I've talked to hate that tax, and I'm sure they're overjoyed it's gone because, again, exactly, it's the working people that it hits the hardest. It's not the rich people who can afford the expensive car services. They can afford, to pay an extra $9 every time they go in and out of Manhattan. It's people like me and, really working class people who need to get to their jobs. Firefighters, teachers, hospital workers. It's just crazy how many normal people this affected. And I have to say, this has made Trump a little even more popular in New York City, the city where he's from.